let's get started then. So it looks like the first one is a question for you, Mark. What is, in your point of view, the most challenging topic for the future of Unicode?
Probably one of the more interesting topics is that a lot of languages are heavily inflected, and these inflections really take the place in English of what you do with prepositions or other constructs. And the words change a lot depending upon their usage. And that is a very challenging area for us to explore. We've been pushing into it and trying to provide some of the kind of building blocks for handling these grammatical changes, but that's definitely an interesting feature of the future. Yeah.
Okay.
I can't really see the questions very well. I'm on the web interface, so I'll depend upon your asking them, Elango.
Sure, no problem. I'll tee them up. So the next is, let's see. There's more than one language system and emoji. What about icons? Let's see.
But let me talk a little bit about icons and emoji.
Yeah.
Unicode has a lot of symbols in it, but it's not really designed to be a repository for all the possible symbols in the world, all the map symbols and very, very specialized sets of symbols that there are, symbols and icons. So we, for a long time, drew a fairly rigid line against these, but then we relaxed that constraint when we first adopted emoji, primarily because emoji were in very, very broad use within Japan and other countries. So we had to have an interoperable solution for dealing with text in those countries, and we ended up adding emoji for that. You can always propose a set of icons based upon some kind of standard or
This meeting is being recorded.
Oh, I cut out for a second. So you can always make proposals which go into the script subcommittee, which works on various sorts of sets of symbols. And you'll see even a lot of kind of old-fashioned terminal symbols that are being proposed and where appropriate, accepted.
Okay, in a similar flavor, the next question is, how does the script ad hoc committee evaluate proposals for a language or a script that is previously unknown to the experts on the committee?
Yeah, well, the script ad hoc committee has had a lot of experience with this. It's really, the burden is on the proposer to provide all of the evidence that's needed to establish not only the existence of the characters, but how they behave. Because until there's a fairly detailed description of how the characters behave, especially for complex scripts like those of South Asia or Southeast Asia, it's very difficult for people to even think about implementing them. Because if the characters merge in a particular way, you have to know that in order to design fonts. If they have special interactions, then that's needed in order to line break them and so forth.
Okay, and the next question is
Oops, I lost your voice.
Can you hear me, Mark?
Yeah, hear you now, yeah.
Okay, great. And the next question is dovetails that nicely. New scripts in Unicode are nice, but to enable the script, we need fonts. Who's coordinating the fonts with Unicode? Is there always a font for each new Unicode character?
There's not always a font for each new Unicode character. As a matter of fact, if you look at the Unicode standard itself and the code charts, we have always been in advance of when fonts were available in systems around the world. So we've always had to deal with devising fonts that we can use for our charts and in the standard. However, those fonts are very simple because they simply show a representative glyph. They don't have to have the exact size, metrics, and so forth that you would expect out of a real production font. And so for that, for fonts, we're dependent upon fonts that are being produced by people out in the world. There are a lot of pretty complete sets of fonts for particular languages. And there are also open source fonts like the Google Noto fonts, which cover a very large number of writing systems.
Okay, and our next question is.
Oops, I lost your voice again.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay, I guess it takes a few seconds. So the next question is, why was Unicode 16-bit proposal preferred instead of ISO 32-bit proposal in the 1980s? Maybe you can talk about the history of that in the merger.
Sure, I'll talk a little bit about the history. We actually, a number of us tried to get ISO to adopt something like the Unicode architecture very early on. And the main difference, the biggest difference was not 32 versus 16-bit. It was the fact that the ISO architecture was built so that you could substitute code pages. So you could say, well, this segment of the coding space is now going to have Chinese in it. And you'd have a special symbol in the text flow that said, oh, I'm switching to this other code set. And that was done for the big sets of characters like Chinese, Japanese, Korean, and so forth. It was really unusable in practice. The problem is that unless you've read a piece of text from the very start of whatever the text stream is, you don't know what a particular byte or sequence bytes means. So we ended up finally being able to reconcile with ISO on an architecture that had just a single, what's called a code point for each character. And then we expanded the possible code points in, I think I had it in the chart I was from earlier, I think in somewhere around 95 to allow for up to 32 bits, which gives you over 1 million characters.
Okay, great.
Back to you.
Can you hear me?
You're muted. I don't know if the space button works for this.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether it's a delay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah, it's always a few seconds. The next question is about IC4X. Why not for Java? I think I can take a shot at that question.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And to the person who asked the question, please get in touch with the IC4X project, and Shane and I and other people can help answer that. But that's actually not, they're not mutually exclusive, in fact. Maybe Mark, though, you can tell us about the history of ICU, since I think you were involved with that. Like, what came first, ICU4J or ICU4C?
Yeah,
anything that we don't know?
Yeah, ICU actually came out of there was a joint venture between IBM and Apple many years ago. That joint venture failed. But one of the things that it produced was an internationalization library, because it was a new operating system that was intended for use by Apple and IBM. And we actually were able to take the internationalization part of that operating system and make a separate package for it. And that package was used by Oracle and by Java, back when Java was not part of Oracle, for their internationalization support. And then we decided that that was a really useful package to have and kept developing it. It shows its roots. It's a big package with a lot of modules, a lot of data, a lot of code, and it's not designed to be as modular as what people need now for smartwatches and so forth. So that's really where ICU came about.
Okay, and can you answer which?
Muted again.
How about now? Yeah.
Yep.
And which came first, ICU for J or ICU for C?
Ah, interesting. Yeah, when we first developed it, it was in C++. We then developed a Java version, which is targeted at Java. That was back before Java had any appreciable internationalization support. And then we ended up backporting the Java to C++ again, and then putting a C layer on top of that. So it was kind of a complicated history, but once we kind of stabilized on those three interfaces, Java, C++, and C, we've tried to keep all of them up to date with each other. So there are occasional cases, like there's a tech preview for Java for formatting person names, and in Java for enhanced message formatting that's coming out pretty soon. That's just in Java right now, but we anticipate porting that to C++. One of the real advantages of ICU4X is that we will have to do less porting, because it makes it much, much easier to call ICU services from any language.
Okay, great. Our next question has some specificity, but I think the nature of the question might actually be pertinent to other people, other types of concerns. So this is talking about what's called the sharp S, the Latin uppercase sharp S.
Yeah.
And it's the Unicode code point 1E9E in hex. So that was added a while ago. However, CLDR still defines the lowercase sharp s as being uppercase to capital S, capital S. And to the person asking the question, it seems wrong to them as a native German speaker.
Yeah.
Are there any plans to change this behavior? What would it do to take so? What would it take to do so?
What would it take to do so? For CLDR, what we look at is kind of common customary usage when we're trying to decide what to do. So, for example, the names of countries and even languages will change over time. We've seen recently a push by Turkey to change the way that the name of the country, Turkey, being different than the name of the bird, which was actually named after the country. And so what we look at for cases like this, or we look at what the most customary usage is, and we ask people who are doing translation, and we ourselves in the committee for English, we look at various sources to try to judge when there is a common use which grows large enough to become the predominant use. That's when we switch over. The traditional uppercase of an SZ was a double S for years, and so we look at kind of, has there been an inflection point to the point where the uppercase of an SZ is more frequently used as the single SZ character or as the double capital S before we make a change.
And on that topic, are there other types of, are there other examples where things change? Like, for example, like the date formatting for like English in Canada, like how do these things change over time if they need to?
They definitely, yes, it's a good question. They definitely change over time. Sweden changed the standard for how they sort characters, for example. We get a lot of changes over time. Some of them are very frequent, like changes in currency codes, which are the most established currency codes to use for a particular country. What are the legal tenders, because those change, and often without enough notice. Same thing for time zones. Time zone rules change a lot, and those have to be changed very quickly. And often countries don't provide enough time for their own citizens to get updated software that work with the new time zone rules. So a lot of these things change over time. A lot of the usage can change in response to different influences, different generations. There's been a lot of impact of English on the way computers formatted things, so that in Norway, for example, you can have a time with a period separating the hours and minutes, or you can have a colon separating the hours and minutes. And there's roughly equal usage of those. So it becomes very difficult. What we don't want to do is have the usage bounce back and forth between different releases of CLDR. So we really try to keep some kind of a sort of conservative attitude towards shifting, because we want to make sure the shift has been real.
Okay, the next question is, first starts off saying congrats for all the work that's been done so far. Is there anything that you are most proud of?
Most proud of, I think the whole idea of Unicode. We were able to get, it was kind of a disastrous situation back when we started. It was very difficult for people to get programs in their languages because it was so difficult to manage that. If you looked at Microsoft, for example, they had completely different code bases for the East Asian languages and the Southeast Asian languages and the Western European languages. And so things were, you get bugs showing up in one implementation, not another, and so forth. We were able to kind of grow in a grassroots fashion and get enough people involved in internationalization within a bunch of companies to see the value of this, that we were able to make this whole project work. And it was very gratifying to see the time when over 50% of the text on the web was in Unicode. That was a fun milestone.
So you mentioned disastrous in the beginning. How right now Unicode is in all of the mobile device operating systems. It's all in the computer operating systems and so on. But how confident were you about making Unicode quote unquote succeed back in the 90s?
We felt that the advantages of making the change, if we were able to help people understand what it could do, that the advantages of making the change were so compelling that it was actually not that hard to convince people that this was a good thing to do. And we very quickly got a large number of companies on board with the change. And we started to get even early versions, I think, Java, HTML, and so forth. Once we started to get a lot of attention, a lot of the changes in tooling that were needed to be made, then we knew it was going to be a success. We just didn't know how long it would take before it would be complete. And it's still not complete. There are lots of screenshots floating around on the web where some program was not fully Unicode enabled, and you get kind of garbage. Even now, I think I lived in Switzerland for a while, and when you communicated with the central government, they were still using Latin 1, which would only do Western European languages. So it was, if you had a Polish name, you couldn't actually, enter your name in a form.
This was recent.
And this was recent, yeah.
Okay, there are a few questions that are from the same person and on a similar theme, so I'll combine them together. And it's basically asking, are CLDR and ICU available on Linux, and are they available in cloud providers like AWS, Azure, Google Cloud? And also, the level of support you get in database vendors?
On the whether it's used in any particular system or distro for Linux, you'd have to dig that information up, and the same with the cloud providers. What was the third part of your question?
Database vendors, do they have a moderate support? What's it typical?
Yeah, most database vendors support Unicode. As a matter of fact, with MySQL, a funny bit was that they actually fully supported the Unicode encoding because of emoji. And so there was, that's been a nice byproduct of the emoji support, is that systems got upgraded to support the full range of 4-byte Unicode, which include emoji. And tended to upgrade on a very regular basis once a year, and emoji is a good part of that. And that also updated them for supporting a lot of different languages and scripts and characters that were not emoji. So that's been a great process.
Okay, our next question is interesting. It's about ICU4X, and I'll post it to you, and I'll see if I can answer if you can't. It says, does the ECMAScript internationalization API use ICU4X? If not, what does it use now?
Okay, it doesn't yet use it, I believe, because ICU4X is just releasing this week.
Right.
But I think ICU4X has tremendous potential. It solves a lot of problems. It takes advantage of many years of expertise in what went into ICU, but takes the opportunity to redesign it in Rust, and which enables a lot of platforms to use this that would have difficulty using it before.
And I'll add on to that. Of course, Shane is the right person to contact about all of this for multiple reasons. But the APIs get standardized by the ECMA4X subcommittee, and they create the APIs. But then it's up to the implementers of the JavaScript engines. Typically, those are groups within a browser, right? Like SpiderMonkey for Mozilla, V8 for the engine for Chrome, and it's up to them to implement changes as they become available. You can use ICU4X as a polyfill in the meantime, because there's the ability to compile to WebAssembly. So right there, you can already use it as Shane showed in his demo, and then in the future, who knows? But that's,
the WebAssembly stuff is pretty exciting.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah.
This is an interesting question. I'm not, and you can interpret it however. Oh, sorry. This will have to be our last question. Oh, we'll have time for maybe like 1 or 2 questions, but this could be our last.
Okay.
So this question is, what could possibly be the augmentation to emojis?
The augmentation, I'm not sure what that means. Perhaps the questioner can rephrase that. Augmentation is difficult.
Is there any
but there is a
accessibility?
question here I see, which is, where's the developer's guide for writing programs using Unicode, CLDR, and ICU? And there are specs for CLDR. It's called LDML, and it's available through the Unicode website. ICU has both the API descriptions and user guides, and then Unicode has the Unicode standard, and then a lot of annexes are available on the web. Both the standard and the annexes are available on the web, and associated standards are also available on the web. So go to the Unicode website, or just search, use your favorite search engine and search for CLDR and documentation or something like that, and you'll come up with it.
Okay, great. I think that should wrap up our Q&A session. So I want to thank you, Mark, for answering our questions in this Q&A session. That was great to hear your insightful answer.
It's a lot more fun to talk to somebody in person than it is to record something. So
I know,
it's much more interesting. Yeah.
This is great. This is great for each, and I hope we can have both. I hope we can do this again and have some in-person stuff in the future. But it was great to have your insightful answers for all of our questions. I want to thank all of our speakers for giving us a wonderful, informative overview of internationalization, the Unicode Consortium, and all of the associated projects. Each of our speakers has done and continues to do lots and lots of work with other volunteers in contributing to their respective projects and committees. Thanks to the organizers for today's event for the work behind the scenes to plan for the event and today's logistics. Importantly, thanks to our organizational and individual members of Unicode for their support, and that makes this event possible. And finally, thanks to all of you in attendance for making this event a success. All of us are genuinely really pleased to see the interest you've shown in Unicode and internationalization. As a note, I know that there have been some questions. We do plan to have the recordings of today's event available in the upcoming weeks. So we hope you stay connected for more information, future events, and can share this information along with your colleagues. As one last thing, I will remind you where you can find some more information. So let me share that. So you can visit unicode.org or home.unicode.org, and you'll find there the technical quick start guide, which should have a lot of information that that should be easy to share, that hopefully can summarize some of the things that you've seen here and have a lot of useful links. So that's a great place to start. Also, how to become a member with Unicode, and the Adopt a Character program, where you can contribute by adopting a character, and you can contribute to Unicode as well in a different way. If you have any feedback, please send it to events@unicode.org. We'd love to hear feedback about today's events or any questions and any type of follow-up. Okay, so with that, thank you again for attending and have a great rest of your day.